The South African economy ticked up slightly by 1% in the first quarter of the year, with agriculture emerging as the standout performer. But the mining and quarrying sector, long considered one of the country's economic pillars, did take a dive, contracting by 4.1%. Let's get some reaction now on the possible impact of illegal mining on the poor performance of the mining sector. And I'm joined in studio by Mihlali Sitefane, the founder of Sitef, a law firm specializing in mining law. Very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, 1% in the first quarter, that's something to be excited about overall before?
Yes, I guess overall you can be excited about it, but I think with any statistics you need to look deeper to see what are the negative contributors and what are the positive contributors to that specific statistic. Let's
talk then about agriculture being the poster boy for you know, a good quarter.
Yes, certainly it has been. It performed incredibly well as compared to, for example, mining. Yes, unfortunately, mining declined by 4.1%, and that obviously, you know, contributed very negatively to the GDP.
Mm-hmm. Should we be concerned?
I believe we need to be concerned because when we look at the statistics in the previous quarters, we haven't seen such a sharp decline. And a decline of 4.1% contribution to the GDP is quite significant. And I think as a country, we need to be concerned because we want mining to contribute more to the economy and not to take away from GDP.
What lies behind this slump?
Particularly in these statistics, what we've seen is that PGMs have actually contributed to the sharp decline. The production of PGMs in the South African economy has declined significantly in the last quarter. And so that's one of the major contributors.
We've had, recently the problem of illegal mining.
Yes.
You know the story.
Yes.
Of what happened.
Yes.
in Sitefane in the northwest. And there were arguments from a lot of stakeholders that this is something that needs to be embraced, that shouldn't be frowned upon. We need to look at changing legislation. There's that whole process that is currently underway. Just your thoughts about how we can avoid slumps like these going forward.
We need to bring all mining production into the main economy, including artisanal and small-scale miners. There are miners who are legitimately wanting to do things the right way. And I mean, last week or towards the end of May, we saw the publishing of the MPRD bill, which makes provision for artisanal and small-scale mining licenses. And so there's been a drive in our economy to recognize and sort of really formalize that sector so that we can enjoy the benefits from artisanal and small-scale mining. So unfortunately, though, if we continue to allow illegal mining to run rampant, we are not going to enjoy the fiscal benefits that actually come with that. And so the legislation, is what we've seen as Sitef and Co, is incredibly crucial to driving that. And, you know, to be honest, not just the legislation, but the implementation, the effective implementation of the legislation.
I mean, your stakeholders like your Makuas, for example, are saying there's an apparent reluctance, or as one of them would put it, it's actually a refusal on the part of the government to actually take the direction that they believe needs to be taken.
No, certainly. I mean, there's great debate about how we incorporate that because the South African economy has for the longest time relied on large-scale mining. Now, certainly we have seen, like I said, towards the end of May, the publishing of the MPRD bill, which incorporates these licenses. Previously, the South African economy, or rather the legislative framework in South Africa, didn't have these licenses, whereas in other countries and other jurisdictions which rely on artisanal and small-scale mining actually did recognize. And so we are moving in a particular direction. However, the question is it fast enough? Will it, you know, yield the results we want, not just from a fiscal perspective, but from the actual holders who actually need to then apply and actually hold these licenses? So it's still out.
But apart from your artisanal mining, but what is still holding back mining broadly? In other words,
yes,
still limiting its potential to the extent we're seeing here with 4.1%?
Firstly, we've seen statistics that South Africa has been struggling to attract global investment for exploration. And we've only been able to attract about less than 1% of the global exploration fund, the money that is available to look for new minerals. Currently, there's been large discussions around critical minerals in South Africa, as one of many countries should be part of that conversation. And so firstly, we need to drive exploration. There needs to be an environment that is conducive for mining companies to thrive in the country so that it can grow. I think we can't also be naive about the fact that we are operating in a global market, and so we will be impacted by global factors. But the question will always remain, as a country, are we doing enough? Do we have ease of doing business in the country? What laws are there? Are there tax incentives? How do we facilitate and make sure that this country grows forward? Are our laws inhibiting for business?
But then are the people who have been tasked with actually doing something about this? I'm talking about your legislators, considering also the fact that, I mean, there's a review of legislation now,
yes,
currently ongoing. We had the minister only the other week taking us through all of that. But do you feel there's a sense of urgency, you know, especially among our legislators? Because let's face it, piloting legislation in this country is a very long and arduous process. The mills there grind very, very slowly. How will we get to that position you're talking about?
Look, legislative process is a constitutional process, and so our constitution actually states the process that a piece of legislation needs to run through before it's enacted as an act of parliament. And so there is that constitutional aspect, and by virtue of just that, there's going to be a time lag, right? However, there are current issues that are on the ground. For example, backlog in applications where people have applied and who want to prospect and who want to mine but aren't able to obtain the licenses on time. There are conflicts, there are appeals, there are fights because of the environment and also the processing of particular applications. And so I think it's multifaceted. Yes, the legislation plays an incredible role, but it's also the implementation of that legislation and how these licenses are processed, making sure that people, when they apply and they're ready to, to get into the ground, that they're able to rely on the legislative framework and the people who are administering it to get their licenses and get into the ground. You will not attract investment without licenses. Projects need to be bankable.
Well, so we're going to leave it for today. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Mihlali Sitefane, founder of Sitef, a law firm specializing in mining law, following, of course, those numbers we were taken through today by Stats SA. Mining really contracting by 4.1%.